It was a Sunday morning, the 7th of December, 1942, the date which will live in infamy.
An Army alert on the Pacific coast. This is defense against any possible invasion attempt.
In the tense atmosphere after Pearl Harbor, many thought Japan would strike again.
The Japanese aviators downed or damaged 19 ships of the United States Navy and killed some 2,300 Americans. This event did not only push the United States to join World War II, but also led the U.S. to commit the worst wartime abuse of its lifetime, Executive Order 9066. This wartime abuse of Japanese Americans was a clear violation of human rights. Even before the attacks on Pearl Harbor in the mid-1940s, the Roosevelt administration created the Immigration and Naturalization Service from the Department of Labor and the Alien Registration Act, which required all resident aliens over 14 years of age to register annually, be fingerprinted, and report any changes of address to the government.
So primarily that's what we did. Well, we had no choice.
It was strawberry time, and we were all out picking strawberries when I looked up and I saw some soldiers posting some sign on the post, and it was noticed that we would have 10 days to get ready to evacuate.
My father was frantically running around trying to sell off as much as he could. He had the 2 horses, and well, he just gave them away practically. They just lost everything they had.
In the week following the attacks on Pearl Harbor, the Department of Justice used the lists of presumably dangerous aliens and interned them. Of the 3,000 or so called enemy aliens, about half of these were Japanese.
All of a sudden, the radio announcer came on hysterical. It says, "The Japs are bombing Pearl Harbor. This is for real." So I went out and looked towards Pearl Harbor. And sure enough, you can see up in the sky this puff of smoke. 3 aircraft flew right over us. Gray, dove gray, with red dots on the wings. I knew they were Japanese. And I felt that the world that I had known and had dreamt about and planned for had come to a shattering end.
For Japanese Americans, the attack on Pearl Harbor marked the beginning of a long nightmare. The government ordered all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, more than 110,000 people, to leave their homes.
The government said that it was for our own good, because if we had stayed on the ranch, people would come and shoot us.
16,000 men, women, and children were sent halfway across the country to a state that didn't want them.
Most Arkansans had never seen Japanese Americans, and most viewed them as enemies of the state.
It was scary to think when we go to bed that all these people are just so close to us and what they might do.
They were confined in concentration camps.
We were surrounded by barbed wire. They had watchtowers with armed American soldiers with rifles pointing in.
In Arkansas and in America, Japanese Americans were prisoners of the U.S. military and of fear.
The day of the attack, the government wanted to show a decisive response and calm the nation's fear. In front of the media, the FBI started arresting Japanese political leaders up and down the West Coast. We are at war. In this area, 8 states has been designated as a theater of operations. I have approximately 240,000 men at my disposal. There are 288,000 enemy aliens, which we have to watch. I have little confidence that the enemy aliens are law-abiding or loyal in any sense of the word. Some of them, yes, but many, no, particularly the Japanese. I have no confidence in their loyalty whatsoever. I am speaking now of the native-born Japanese, 117,000 in California alone.
Boarded the train early in the morning, and for 4 days and 3 nights, we all just sat. Gosh, it was all cramped, hot. We couldn't go anywhere, and we had to sleep sitting up, and that actually was torture.
I remember they're letting us out once, out in the desert. And the guards were there, making sure that nobody runs away. Where could we run away to when it was out in the desert? There wasn't anything there.
Finally got there. Yeah, the train just stopped in the middle of nowhere. And I looked out, oh my gosh, why are we stopping? And someone says, oh, it must be Jerome. And I didn't see anything. It was just total boondocks.
These camps began receiving Japanese Americans late in March of 1942. In most cases before these were entirely completed, and often when completed, they were inadequate in size, sanitation, and protection. In Jerome, Arkansas, and Hart Mountain, Wyoming, the evacuees suffered from freezing winters and blistering summers. The camps were divided into blocks. Each block housed around 60 families and had its own laundry, restrooms, and showers. Many families were crowded into small spaces. Nearly 40% were children and 70% were American citizens, all of them surrounded by barbed wire. One of the many rules established in the camps were that Japanese Americans needed to be under military guard at all times.
You had to line up for everything. You had to line up for breakfast, line up for lunch, line up for dinner.
The daily activities in the internment camps were far from what the Japanese would have experienced in their own homes.
That was the hardest thing to get used to. There's a stall with maybe about 10 or 15 shower heads, and there you are having to go take a shower. So we used to wait until about 3 o'clock in the morning. The circumstances were very, to us, humiliating.
The camps had schools, medical care, camp newspapers, and sometimes musical entertainment. Also, internees were paid by the government to do work in the camps. $13, $16, or $19 per month, depending on the amount of work done. Unfortunately, some internees died from inadequate medical care or the high level of emotional stress. In 1948, Congress agreed to pay for some of the property lost. They began by giving the Japanese Americans less than 10 cents for each dollar they had lost. Congress attempted to apologize for their wrongful actions in 1988 by awarding each surviving intern $20,000 via the Civil Liberties Act. The act was signed by Ronald Reagan. While the American concentration camps never reached the levels of Nazi death camps as far as atrocities are concerned, they remain a dark mark on the nation's record of respecting civil liberties and cultural differences. The Japanese began to live normal lives, except many had trouble finding jobs and getting money loans. After years went by, they started farms and bought new houses. Others were damaged for life. This tragic event left different people with different emotions. Many were killed and others wounded forever. Today, many are suing to be paid back for what their family lost. This is the price we pay for racism.